Hello, welcome to the first in a series of videos that are going to start teaching you how to make plugins for Unturned. If you don't know what a plugin is, basically it's a server-side modification for the game. What that means is you can change any code in the server, you can add your own code, you can add features, anything you want, as long as the client supports it, the client being a player. So to get started, you're going to need a couple things, and all these links will be in the description. First, you're going to need to download Git, which is a source control software. And you're going to want to get, if you're on Windows, you're going to want to get the standalone x64 installer, usually, unless you're on ARM. So we'll go ahead and download and run that. You can install it in the default location. And I would uncheck the Windows Explorer integration. And you can probably uncheck Scalar as well. And this. And I'm going to switch to use Microsoft Edit as the default editor. That's a new kind of Vim-like thing that Windows has installed. And I'm going to, we can let Git decide on the main branch, shouldn't matter. And we also want to leave this checked. We want to, we'll use an external OpenSSH. And we use the native library. This is fine as is. We'll use the default console window. Leave that on merge. Leave that. And install. And now that that's done, we also are going to want to download Visual Studio Community. This is optional. You can also use another editor such as Writer or even VS Code, but Visual Studio makes a lot of things easier for beginners, so I would recommend it. So you're going to go to the VS Community website and you're going to click download, also link in the description, and you're going to run this setup here. So when you're installing, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select .NET Desktop Development, and you're also going to want to select Game Development with Unity. And we are going to install this separately, so don't worry about checking this. And that should be everything you need. If you're interested in checking out something else, go ahead and choose that, but for Unturned, it's not necessary. Now, while this installs, if you're not using Visual Studio, you need to install the .NET SDK. And the latest one is fine. Currently that's 10.0. So you can just click download here and run that. But the Visual Studio installer also installs .NET. So you can just install Visual Studio. In the meantime, while this is installing, you can go ahead and install steamcmd, which we'll need to run the server. Link in the description. If you click on Windows here, there's this download link right here that will download it in a zip file. And what I would recommend doing is extracting this to steamcmd like that. Just hitting extract, there you go, and then you can just go ahead and run this. Now what you're going to want to do is type in login anonymous, press enter. Then you're going to type in app update 1110390, which is the ID for the dedicated server for Unturned. And if you want, you can also say beta preview if you want to use the preview branch, but I'm going to leave it on public for now. And this will download about almost 2 gigabytes of data, so it will take a minute. So while this is installing, what we're going to do is we're going to download Unity. I recommend downloading Unity so you can look at the Unturned 3 SDK, and you also need it to create UIs or other mods. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Unity's website. It's just unity.com, and then we're going to click on download Unity. So now what you'll have to do is you're going to have to create a free account for Unity. I already have one, so I'm just going to sign into that. So once you've signed into that, it might block a pop-up, so go ahead and allow that if it does, and then it'll download the Unity Hub setup. So you can go ahead and click on that and run that. And press yes. And then go and install it in the default location. And then once that's done, you can finish and you can run Unity Hub. And you will have to agree to their license agreement. And then you can go ahead and sign in again, and it should instantly sign you back in since you just logged in earlier. And go ahead and close out all their alerts. And you now have Unity Hub open. So it should not, I don't know why it's downloading this by default. So if it's downloading something, go ahead and cancel that because you do not need that version of Unity. Please stop. Okay, there we go. So now what you're going to need to do is go to another link in the description, which takes you to the download archive, which looks like this once it loads. So at the moment, Unturned uses Unity 2022.3.62 F3, which is right here. But this might change in the future, so check to see if there's any comments at the top of pinned comments, which will have the new version of Unity in it. So then go ahead and click install. And now this will try to open in Unity Hub. Go ahead and allow that. And then Unity Hub will open and it'll ask you to start installing. So we already installed Visual Studio, so we can uncheck that. And you might want to download the documentation, but also you can download the Linux build support and Mac build support for Mono. This allows you to create multi-platform bundles, which you need to create UIs. And then you press install. And this will take a bit, so let that go ahead. And in the meantime, let's check on Steam. Oh, look at that, it's done. So now you just type quit, press enter, and it'll close it. And Visual Studio is also done. So at this point, we are just waiting on Unity. But in the meantime, we can also go ahead and download the Unturned SDK, link in the description. So what you can do is you can go to code here, and then you can just copy this HTTPS here like this. So at this point, you just need to find a place to save it to. This needs to be somewhere where you can come back to. I wouldn't recommend saving it in documents if you're using OneDrive, because then that's all going to get uploaded to your OneDrive, which you don't want. What you can do instead is you can go to users, your name, and then create, once you start using Visual Studio, it'll make this, but you can say source, and then repos, like that, and then you can clone it here. So if you right click, open in terminal, and since you've installed Git, you can just say git clone, and then paste that URL with Control V or right click, and then just press enter. And it's going to download the U3 SDK into this folder here. And once that's done, we just need Unity to be installed and we can open this. So while we wait on Unity to install, we can go ahead and start setting up our Visual Studio project. So what you're going to do is just type in Visual Studio right here, and hopefully it shows up. And you can open that. And then you're going to have to sign in with an account. I would sign in with GitHub. It's probably the easiest. And then once you've signed in with GitHub, you can go ahead and press authorize at the bottom. And yes, press open link. And it should start loading in the background. You're probably going to want to choose dark theme, and you can leave it on general. And you can hit start Visual Studio. At this point, it'll launch you to an empty screen here. And we're going to go ahead and create a simple little test plugin. So we're going to do create new project. And then we're going to search for class library. And you're going to want to make sure you pick the one that says C# here with the little green C# icon at the top. You don't want the Visual Basic one, and you also don't want the .NET Framework one. You want just the plain class library with the C# icon. Press next, and we're going to do a little test plugin, maybe like call it that. And you can sometimes check this. If you check this, that means that you want to have a separate folder for your project, which is usually fine unless you're doing unit testing. which most people aren't. So I'm going to go ahead and check this. And you'll see this goes into your source repos folder by default. That's fine, unless you want to move it to another drive. Up to you. But then we're going to go ahead and hit next. And we're going to switch to .NET Standard 2.1. This is important. Make sure you switch to .NET Standard 2.1 because 10 will not work. And then you click Create. And now we have our new plugin. You can go ahead and close out of Copilot. We don't need that. And I also recommend making a few changes to the settings, although it's not entirely necessary. First of all, I'm going to search for compact, and I'm going to use compact spacing in the Solution Explorer, which makes things a little more compact over here. And go to languages, C# code style, and then we're going to look for general formatting in code style, sorry. Let's make this a little bigger. And we're going to look for namespace declarations, and we're going to just change this to file scoped, and we're going to press OK. Because file scope namespaces are the best. Great, so now we have our plugin, our basic plugin. What you're going to want to do is make a couple quick changes by double clicking on the C# project file here. So what you're going to want to do first is you're going to want to go in and type lang version, and then you can do latest. So what that will do is that will unlock all the latest C# features for you to use. And once all you have to do is close it, it'll save fine. And now we have our basic class here, class 1. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit Control Dot to access my quick actions, and I'm going to change this to a file scope namespace because it's cleaner and it's easier to read. And then I'm going to say here, I'm going to say test plugin. It's fine for this. So this is kind of the main class for your plugin. So we're going to rename the file. It's not called class 1. And there we go. So right now we have an empty C# project, but we don't have access to anything in Unturned because we have to reference that. So there's two ways to do this. The normal way that everybody's shown is to just do add project reference, and then you can click browse down here, browse. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to where we installed Unturned, which is going to be C, steamcmd, Steam Apps, Common, U3DS. So this is where Unturned's installed now. This is your server Unturned, not your client. And then we're going to go to Unturned Data Managed. And we're going to click a few things here. We're going to click Assembly C#. You always need that. That's the main Unturned assembly. You're also going to need com.rlabrque.steamworks.net, which contains all the Steam code. You're also going to need sdg.net transport, for the most part, usually. And you're going to want to find Unity Engine and Unity Engine.core module, which is right here. So these are the main 5 that you need. So we're going to hit add. And then we're going to hit browse again because we also have to import the RocketMod libraries. So that's going to be in U3DS. Then we're going to go to extras, rocket.unturned, and we're just going to drag select all 3 of these and click add. And we're going to press OK. That took a long time. All right, but now you see we have a bunch of assemblies here, namely assembly C#, which is unturned. And we also have net transport, which is used for communicating between the client and the server. It's a dependency, so we need it. And we also have Steamworks, which contains a lot of important stuff like Steam IDs, which you need. And then we have the stuff from Unity Engine. This is the main stuff. Sometimes there's other stuff you might need, like we might go to browse, for example. If we want to do some physics stuff, we can go manage, and then we can grab Unity Engine.physics module. So we might need that for, say, raycasting, which is where you figure out what a player is looking at. That's something you might need that for. And there's other uses, like maybe if you wanted to do some stuff with colliders or whatever, you might need physics as well. Okay, so now we have everything imported, and I said there's two ways to do that. There's one other way you can do that, and that's using a package that I made on NuGet called Unturned.MSBuild. So what this does is it just references Unturned's libraries for you. It doesn't actually contain the code, it just references them for you. So you can just go in here, and instead of, this is from what we just did, instead of that, you can just say PackageReference include equals Unturned.MSBuild version equals, we'll just say star, which means latest. And then we're going to say IncludeAssets equals build. So that's just saying don't include any libraries, just the like the compile time information from the library, which is basically the same as what this says, but a little shorter. So after that, you also need to add in which libraries you'd like to reference. So I'm going to say we want UnturnedReference, we want assembly C#, we want sdg.net transport, and we want com.rlab.steamworks.net. And we also want Unity Engine and Unity Engine.core module. And I'm also going to throw in physics module. Now we also need to reference the Rocket libraries, RocketMod libraries. So we're going to say RocketReference include, and then we use rocket.unturned, rocket.core, and rocket.api. Those are the three Rocket libraries. And we'll save that. And we'll go ahead and close out. And you can see in our assemblies, we also have all the ones we just listed. So now we need to define our actual plugin. So we do this by creating a new class. I'm going to call it test plugin. And then we're going to inherit from Rocket plugin. And then this is our configuration class. So we need to create a new configuration class. So we'll just do right click, add class. You can also just press Shift F2. And then you can type a class name. So we'll say test plugin configuration. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to create a iRocket plugin configuration. And we're also going to have to make this class public instead of internal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hover over this area here. We're going to control dot and we're going to implement interface. And Visual Studio is going to generate this load defaults function for us. What we're going to do here is we're going to add a new property which we can configure. So we'll call it log message, or call it startup log message. So we'll just configure what gets printed. And you got to remember that this is a user config, so you should annotate it as nullable, because the user could type in null as the config value, and that would mess things up. And we're also going to go to load defaults. We're going to say hello, my test plugin, and then we'll eventually set this up to load on startup. So now what we can go to back to our test plugin, and then this is where we put in our configuration type right here. So we're going to say test plugin configuration, and that's our class. So now you have a plugin. What we can do is we can type override, and then it'll give us a list of functions we can override. So what we want to do is override load, and we also want to override unload. So load gets called as soon as the plugin loads, which is right after workshop items are downloaded. And unload gets called on shutdown. So what we can do, we could say like logger.log test plugin is starting up. And then we could also say logger.log configuration. So this is like this.configuration, except you don't need this. And then you can say .instance because it's a singleton, and then you can say startup log message. So then we're going to print that as well. And we're also going to add a little log on shutdown. Test plugin is shutting down. So now we have a very basic rudimentary plugin. Also, I should mention that this package adds a bunch of global usings, so that's why I'm not having to import any of this. But if you were doing it manually like I did the first time, you would have to import some of this. So that's why I suggest using my package. Okay, so now that you have this plugin, we can go ahead and build. by clicking Control B, or you can go up here and you can click Build Solution, and you'll see it's taking a minute, but it is building. And you see one succeeded, that means it built correctly. And it also gives you a path to where it put it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the folder for this path, and I'm just going to paste it in the top of the File Explorer, and we can see our plugin here. So what do we do with this? It's a good question. So first of all, we have to create a server to test it on. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to C, steamcmd, which we installed earlier. We're going to go to Steam Apps, Common, U3DS, and you might want to pin this to your quick access because you're going to need to get to it a lot. So now we can just click U3DS up here, and then we're going to go to servers, and you'll see that nothing is there because we don't have any servers. So what we need to do a couple things. First, we need to install RocketMod. So if you just go to Extras, and then you double click Install Rocket, it will do just that, and then press any key to close it. So now if we go to Modules, you'll see that Rocket is installed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new server. So what you can do, you see example server here, you can copy this and duplicate it, so paste it. And then we're just going to say we'll just say test server or rocket server. And then we're going to right click it and we're going to hit show more options and then click edit. And you can delete all the stuff that says rim, anything that starts with rim. All you need is these last two lines. You can also delete this. So then you'll see it says start, whatever, and then these are our arguments here. So what we're going to probably want to do is change this to an internet server, which means that other people can join. Obviously, you'd have to port forward and everything, but other people can join. And then you want to give it a server name. So we'll say Rocket Test Server. And it's also important to remember you can't put arguments after this because then your server name will be this. So you have to put them all before. So if you ever have any command line argument, you got to put it before that. And then we can go ahead and save this and exit. And then I'm going to just double click it to create the server. And it's going to start loading. So while this loads up, there's actually another thing that we need to do here. And we need to create a way to update the server. Because right now, after a new Unturned update comes out, it will not update. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on my desktop, but you could also just put it in here. So I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to create a new text document. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to make sure I select the .txt, and I'm going to call this update U3DS.bat, which is a batch file. And you can press yes on that. Now, one thing that you need to be careful of, if you have to make sure you have this checked, file name extensions, because if you have this turned off and you try to create a text document, the .txt won't show and you can't change that file extension. So it is important that you have file name extensions turned on. Now you can right click this and edit, and then we can say we want to run steamcmd. So we'll do we'll go to steamcmd and we will press allow on that. And then we're going to just copy as path right here. And then we'll paste it right here. So that's our path to our steamcmd. Okay, and then we're going to do plus login anonymous plus app update, and this will be in the description so you can copy paste it, but plus app update, that number, and then we're optionally, you can say beta preview if you want to use the preview branch. Otherwise, put public or exclude this completely. And then we're also going to put validate, which will make it validate the files if there's not an update. And then we're going to say plus quit. And then we're just going to save this. And our server has loaded, so that's great. We can type shutdown now. And then just to recap on that, you can double click this whenever you want to check for updates on your server. And if there's not an update, then it's just going to validate the files. So it's the same as going into Steam and pressing like verify integrity of game files. But this takes forever, so I'm not going to wait for it. I'm just going to close it. Now we have our server set up. We can go to steamcmd, we can go to our quick access pin, and we can go to servers, and now we have our new server here. So you'll notice we have a Rocket folder here. This is added by RocketMod, and this is where we put our plugins. So what we can do is we can leave this folder open, and then I'm going to make a new tab, and I'm going to go back to this folder that we copied from here. This is your plugin output, or your build output. And then I'm just going to copy the DLL file. You only need the DLL file. And then I'm going to paste it into plugins. So now what I can do is I can restart the server using this batch file. The one we just made. Where is it? Rocket test server.bat. Double click it. And you'll see the server start coming up again. And then you can see Rocket loading there. So let's actually scroll back up and take a look at the logs real quick. Right here, you'll see it adds all the vanilla Rocket commands. And then it also, you'll see it found test plugin right here. And then you'll see it says loading test plugin from this DLL here. So you'll see now that if we go to servers, and then Rocket test server, and now we go to Rocket again, and we go to plugins, you'll see it's created a new folder here for our plugin. And it's got configuration and translation files. You'll see it wants to open this with Edge by default because I'm on a virtual machine, but I'm going to have it open it with Visual Studio instead. So now we have our configuration. We got hello from my test plugin. You'll see that since the file didn't exist, it added this here. And this is like our default configuration. We also have translations, which we haven't done anything with yet, but this is where you would be able to like modify chat messages and stuff to fit your own server. What we're going to do now is we're going to try changing that config and we're going to reload it. So I'm going to say hello again, save. And then now I'm going to rocket reload test plugin. You'll see it's shutting down and then it's starting back up and then it says hello again. So we can make changes to the config and then we can rocket reload our test plugin. So now we can go ahead and type shutdown and we have our first plugin. So by the time we've done all this, Unity should also be downloaded by now. So let's check on that. Yep, Unity is installed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to projects and we're going to add from disk. And then I'm going to navigate to that folder where we downloaded Unturned SDK. So this will be under your user, and then it'll be under source repos U3 SDK. And then I'm going to just click open, or wherever you saved it. It might not be there. And then I'm going to launch it. Now this will take quite a while to launch because it has to import everything. So in the meantime, we're going to go back to Visual Studio and we're going to set up one more thing here. So you might have noticed that that was kind of a lot of work to get our plugin into Unturned. So we want to simplify that a little bit. So there's a few different things you can do to make that easier. For starters, I'm going to right click on our solution here. I'm going to right click on the solution and I'm going to click add an existing project. So you'll notice that this takes an exe file. So what we can do is we can go to U3DS and then we can grab Unturned.exe and we'll click open and that'll add this as a project. And you can also hit set as startup project. And then that will make it so you can hit start instead of going to the batch file. So we're going to have to make some changes here. So we're going to right click on it. We're going to properties. And then executable here is fine, but we need to add some arguments. So first we are going to open that batch file up again, which was in U3DS, the rocket test server.bat. And we're going to edit that. I'm just going to copy this part into Visual Studio here, like that. And you should leave attach on no. And debugger type, we want to change to manage.NET Framework 4.x. But you can't debug. Debugging doesn't work in Unturned, just to clarify. And then we're going to go ahead and close this. And now we should be able to press start, and it will open our server up. There's also another thing we need to do, and that's we need to change where it builds to. Because you don't want it building to that folder, you want it building to the plugins folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to U3DS, servers, Rocket Test Server, Rocket plugins, and we're going to copy this path here. And then we're going to add a new property group. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say condition equals exists. And then I'm going to paste the path in here just like that. So you'll see we use a single quotation mark and the exist function. So what this is going to do is it's going to check see if this folder exists. And if it does, we're going to change the outdir or the output directory to this folder right here. There is one other thing we need to do, and that is that we need to disable the, you'll notice how when it outputs the plugin, you'll notice how when it outputs the plugin, it puts it in debug net standard 2.1. We want to disable that, so it just outputs it directly to the output folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, oops, we're going to say append runtime identifier to output path false. And we're also going to say append target framework to output path false. So what this will do is that'll prevent this folder from being made, basically. That's what we don't want. So at this point, we can save the project, and then we can build with Control B or up here. And you'll notice that this file did not get updated. You see it's a few minutes behind. And then we can also go to our server, Rocket Test Server, oh, and Unity's up. And we can look at Rocket plugins, and you'll see the last modified date on this one is 7/35, which means it copied to here instead. These folders, or these files aren't required, but they're fine. They're not gonna hurt anything. So now, when you build your plugin, all you have to do is build with Control B, and then you can just hit start. So let's actually try, making a change here. It auto built, or it auto copied, yay. Save. So now you can Control B again, press start. And we'll let it start up real quick. Alright, so the plugin's up now, and we can check, and we can see that it said test plugin is starting up. It auto copied, yay! So that means that it worked. So one thing you need to know is that you cannot update your plugin without restarting the server. The only thing you can change is that configuration file, whatever that is. Here, you can change this, but you can't actually rebuild your plugin. That's great. We have a plugin working, and we have Visual Studio set up. Every project would basically be set up the same way. So maybe you can make a template if you create a bunch of helper functions that you want to stick around. But otherwise, that's all you would do. So one other thing while you're working on plugins is you're going to want to be able to reference the source code, and that's why we've been downloading Unity and everything. So that way we can look at the source code. So what you're going to want to do is open that project up like we did earlier, and it's going to take a while to update or to load in all the files. And then we're just going to go to assets, and we're going to click open C# project. And then now that we're done with that, we can just close Unity and hit allow on this. And there we go, we have our Unity project. So most of the code is going to be in assembly C#, and then it'd be under runtime assembly C#, or you can go to Unity Project Explorer, and it's a little easier to navigate here. And we'll look at assembly C#, and for example, we might go to like Unturned, and then look at like provider. Go to provider. Provider is the main class in Unturned, so this is where you're gonna find like all your startup stuff usually, and connections. It's a very long class, and it has a lot of stuff in it. But for example, this is how you would find this class, and we'll look more at how to read through the Unturned code in a later video. But for now, you should have everything set up, and you should be good to go to start developing Unturned plugins. Thanks for watching. Good luck.